Hello. Let's see. How you doing, guys? It's 4:20. Let's get high. So, I was thinking about something, but then I forgot to think about something. I completely forgot about everything. But I've been working a lot today. I'm glad I did. I just did this podcast, another podcast. I like doing these podcasts, and I think the information that I have, just really blows people away. And so I'm glad to do that. I like blowing people away. It says that art, the thing about art is that art should surprise, and it shouldn't be predictable. Which reminds me that I've been learning about this idea of Viad Baklau. Viad Baklau. Viad means until then. Baklau means, and sort of the rest of it, meaning that you get to this place and you kind of look out and extrapolate over that, out of that, like sort of what is the future. I don't mean like predicting the future, but just, if I go here or there, what's probably going to happen. And then there's just Va'ad, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And so most people live their lives Va'ad B'Klal. They do something, and and they think, they extrapolate. So like you go to college, they don't know you're going to get a job, but you kind of extrapolate. If I go to college, I'll probably get a better chance to get a job or do something, have more opportunity than if I don't go to college. A lot of people, that's why they go to college. But when you live on the edge, that's just Viad. You're living on the edge, and you don't know what's going to happen. And that's when you get close to God. Of course, you have to be ready when you do that. The key is you have to be ready for the consequences. And as long as you're ready for the consequences, whatever they are, I'm going to do that. Whatever the consequences are, I'm going to deal with it. And then you're free to do what you do. And one can't say after, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that. That's what the person did, and we need to own it. And but that, oftentimes there's beautiful consequences and beautiful experiences that you have by living on the edge. And living on the edge, experiencing life is where knowledge comes from. Knowing. I wouldn't say knowledge. Knowing. That's where knowing, because knowing is an experience. And the reason that people live on the edge, on many different edges, and I'm very convinced about this, because it's not just people who are, whatever, like, seeking some sort of, everyone's like seeking something. Like when people, because I worked in the clubs like back in the 90s reading tarot cards, I got to know a lot of a lot of the gay people there because there's a whole gay scene there at the club kids, and they liked to experiment with shit that got them close to death. And sometimes, they even slipped over and died, and then everyone got in trouble. But and I'm convinced that it has to do with wanting to get like sort of close to God, because you know when nobody is there, God is there. And death is kind of a place, I think, where you're alone with God. Then eventually the angels come and start doing shit, but for that moment, you're alone with God. Even though God is everywhere all the time to everybody. But nonetheless, there are certain times, that it says in Ashrei and Tehillim that God answers everyone that calls, and God answers those who call with truth. And they ask, no, what's the difference? You ask with truth. So there's a difference that we all have this relationship with the Creator, whether we like it or not. Whether we like the Creator, what the Creator is doing, whether we don't, whether we feel, we don't think that we care. But we're always coming up against the Creator. And and it's just, it's funny, no matter how we go in life, like there's the Creator, and wherever you go in life, if you're on that edge, you're close to the Creator. So I used to do, like in the 60s, like I hitchhiked a lot because, I was really confused about what was going on in the world. And this was a way to talk to people. In cities, it's very hard to talk to people because everyone kind of has an agenda. But on the road, people pick you up just because they want to talk to you. They didn't have iPhones or earphones or whatever phones. They had radios, AM radios, and the opportunity to speak to another human being and to do someone a good favor and sort of get their story and maybe tell someone something that they couldn't tell anybody else. And in this way, that was my way of trying to figure out life. Plus I carried with me a bunch of books, and I discovered reading when I was in the Navy. There's something, and I've been thinking about this recently. I'm not sure why, but I just think like just being out on the ocean, reading a book. I mean, being rocked in the arms of the waves. It's just something unbelievable. And storms that come up, and you're being just knocked around, and you're just like, they call these ships, tin cans, because when you're out in the middle of the ocean, it's like a tin can, like a cork, just like managing just to stay afloat. And sometimes, you're just completely covered by waves. I mean, they just wash over you, and you just have to be careful that you have to be going into the wave. You never want to get, like broadsided by a wave. It happened to me once in Lake Erie. And Lake Erie is notorious because it's an extremely shallow lake. It means when there's storms, so the waves can come out of nowhere because they're repelling from the from the bottom. From the bottom of the lake. And if the bottom of the lake is close and there's a lot of turbulence up above, then you just don't know where anything is coming from. And we were on this little ship. I mean, it was like about 150 feet, which is pretty small for a ship. And we got hit by one of those, man. And we went so far over, like everything fell over, and you could just hear everyone, feel everyone hold their breath because you didn't know if the ship was going to continue going that way or was going to bounce back up. And luckily, we bounced back up. But that was a trip, and that's the kind of thing, where you're living, uh, you know, close to the edge, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you have no real control over what's going to happen, and all you can do is experience it and know that if you get through it, you'll have an experience, and it will probably inform, the rest of your life. And some people, and we all generally have things in our lives that happen that are like that. God forbid, being in an accident where when something just slows down, time slows down, and you can see everything happening, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's all gonna happen. And or times of great joy, like having a child, or times of great grief, like losing a person. All these things are experiences that make a person deeper in life, because everyone can talk about life and death, but until you've lived life and death, you really don't know what you're talking about. And so some people, they think getting close to God means getting close to spirituality, and they try to be spiritual and not do anything wrong. But that's not, God's not very interested in that. You have to understand that's just how everything works to keep everything balanced between the spiritual and the physical. But God, God's not physical, and God's not spiritual. So for God, like it's all the same. What God's interested in is the story. So if a person is willing to get close to the edge because they're looking for something, they're looking for the truth. 60s, I was looking for the truth, and eventually, after 5 years, I found Torah. In that time, I had tried many things, lived in many different ways, experienced different people. And in a sense, when I came to the Torah, I really brought something to the Torah, which I didn't really appreciate, certainly at the time, though, other people kind of did appreciate it. But and later I read in Sadhu Kohen's Pri Tzaddik, Sadhu Kohen Pri Tzaddik, that I forget what I was going to say. Oh, I almost have it, but I don't. It slipped out of my mind. The mind is the closest spiritual link that we have. And that's why it's all the time moving and stuff. And we're trying to process all this stuff. And sometimes you just forget where you are. Oh, well. Anyways, I would encourage people to ask questions if you have some questions. I was just going on like it was some sort of monologue or something. But I am here as a um, a mystic. See, and mystics, I think we need to live on the edge. You can't be like a comfortable mystic, doesn't seem to me. Because you always want to be experiencing God, and you experience God on the edge, which is certainly what I was talking about. But, but anyways, so, gee, I don't know. Here we got a question. Love the stories. That's not really a question. Yeah, so it says in the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah was written by Abraham Avinu 4,000 years ago. And in the very beginning, he says, he kind of sums up creation. Sofer, Sefer, V'tzipor. The Sofer is the writer. The Sefer is the book, and the Tzipor is the story. So there's no question the writer, the author is God. God is writing this story. See, if God wanted to, God could have created everything in one moment. God didn't need 6 days and to rest on the seventh. What, God's tired? But God didn't want just creation. God wanted a story. So it's a story from the first day until the last day of creation, how creation came into being. And that's a hint to all of us that, that's what life is about. Life is about a story. And now I remember what Rabbi Tzadok wanted to say and what I wanted to say. The whole thing comes back to me. That Rabbi Akiva was considered the greatest of the rabbis 2,000 years ago. And says all the halacha, when it was decided actually how to do it, they went according to Rabbi Akiva. And why is that? Because Rabbi Akiva came from parents who were not Jewish. And they became Gerim. In other words, they converted to Jewish. They said, we understand that this is God, and God wants 613 commandments done, and we're going to do it. And they become Jewish, considered anyone who becomes Jewish actually has a Jewish soul, but for some reason was born into a non-Jewish body, and they become Jewish like everybody else, meaning there's acknowledgement that they also have a Jewish soul, which is a soul that was created before creation. And that's why we have 613 commandments to do. But Rabbi Akiva, because his parents, in the beginning were not Jewish, meant that he had all that DNA in him of non-Jewish experiences. And that's what made his opinion greater than everybody else's opinion. Because of that experience and his ability to look at things not just from a Jewish perspective, but from a world perspective. And that made him the greatest of all the rabbis. And, I felt not that I'm in any way comparing myself to Rabbi Akiva, God forbid. But, but I did, what I brought to the Torah is my own experiences in life. And soon as I heard like certain ideas, like Rotzi V'shu, running and returning, the angels, they run and return. Now, I don't know what that means to most people. But as soon as I heard it, it meant, light. That's how light operates. It runs and returns. I remember studying about this on a ship out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Me and a friend, mate, we got interested in this stuff. We had a little library there, and we tried to understand what light was, because the whole idea that if anything goes the speed of light, it increases to infinity. And Einstein predicted that light has a quality. It's called the photon, that actually has Mamushas has that it's something, it's material, and it should increase to the to infinity, but it doesn't, because it also has a ray. And up until Einstein, everyone thought that a ray, that's what the sun was. Light is a ray. And he showed that light is not just a ray, that light has actually material in it, atoms in it. And he proved it by challenging scientists of the day to go out and to measure the light as it on a day of of an eclipse. And they did that and discovered that the light bent around the moon, which is what Einstein predicted, because it has substance. Substance is the word that I'm looking for, because it has substance. And that's what makes light not be able to go faster than the speed of light, because they're kind of holding on to one another. Like one wants to go evaporate into wave, and the other one wants to bring everything down to matter. And so they're kind of pulsating between them, constantly keeping this perfect balance of a ray of light. As soon as I heard the idea of Bratzi V'Tshuv, I said, "Ooh, it's talking about light." And I remember trying to explain this to the people that I was trying to learn how to read the Torah from, who were very strict Russian people. And they found a little interest in it, but not enough that anything that they would pursue. But the more and more that I learned, the more that I saw how these secrets, these spiritual secrets, are very reflective in science. And to me, like, that's like a cool sign. That means for someone who's looking for the truth, that's a sign of the truth. Truth in Torah is emet. Aleph, Mem, Taf. The Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The Mem is the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the Taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Meaning that truth must be consistent from its beginning, its middle, its end. The whole thing has to be logical. Why? Because God created creation b'chokmah, created creation with logic. And that's why we respect logic. We call it cause and effect. And one thing happens, it causes another thing, it affects something else to happen, and that's logical. And when something happens and we don't see a cause, we only see the effect, we don't see the cause, so we're like, hey man, we're missing something. And people who look at creation and look into the galaxy and see a black hole and say, oh, we're exploded out of this black hole, something out of nothing, it's just completely wrong. This is just not how things work. That nothing is, we just don't understand what's on the other side. But there is something, and there's much that's written about it. And that's why it's important to get my book, Zohar Beyond the Black Hole. A recent book, just published, explains all this stuff really clearly, and the ramifications behind knowing what the truth is, the truth about creation. It's really, it's so fundamental. It's so important. And particularly when people are being taught things like, the Big Bang Theory, where life just happens, or religion, which has reduced that God into some sort of monotheism, some sort of spiritual entity. And both these things are like, are just really stupid ideas. And the only reason that they persist is because the truth has not been told. But once the truth is told, that it wasn't something that came out of nothing, but it was nothing that came out of something. And all of a sudden, all of creation becomes logical. And the more that we see these threads from the other side of the universe being tied together and everything forming a web of light around this earth, because we are the lowest point in creation, and that is why God made creation in order to have a relationship with every person on the earth. Everyone has a story, a beautiful story that God thinks is beautiful. And all the little things that we do inside of ourselves that no one knows about. But God knows. These are things we can share with the Creator, because the Creator creates us constantly, all the time, And even after the body is gone, the consciousness goes back to the soul. And all the things we did on this earth, and all the things that God found meritorious, found a cool part of the story, not in judgment, but just that it's a cool part of the story, because so much of what we do is not, even when it's bad, it's not really our fault. And that's the truth of it. It says, eventually God will say everything was b'shogeg. B'shogeg means it's just a mistake. Even people who did things on purpose. Even people who fought with God. God would just say, like, it was all a mistake. You didn't really understand. If you understood, you wouldn't do that. And when people, eventually everyone's going to understand, and we'll all be cool. And the only thing we'll be embarrassed for things that we did. And that's why we want to do things that are meritorious in God's eyes, not necessarily what some spiritual entity, an angel, or whatever is saying is right or wrong. But we're living our life, together with the Creator. That is the only thing to hold on to. It's all that is always there. The Creator is always there to everybody, all the time. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, God is there. And God wants to have a relationship. And when we have problems, and we can talk to God. And when we have joys, we can share them with God. And God likes this more than all the people genuflecting or reading things or, whatever. God wants to get down and dirty with us. God just wants us to be real. Just be genuine. Just be who you are, because every human being is as different as every human thumbprint. They're all different. And God sees all of these very, subtle nuances and loves them, and finds place for all of them. And all of them is part of the story of life, and the part of the book of life, and our little books and our little time upon planet Earth becomes part of God's book. And, God's going to be around for a long time, man. And there will be in the book, right there with God, man. So, life is short, but it's important. Therefore, get my book, Zohar, Beyond the Black Hole, and read it. It will help you. All right. Thank you very much for watching me and getting high with me, and think of some good questions. And I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.